What's up, amigos? Diablo 4 is right around the corner, so I think it's time to start pumping out some more build guides in preparation for the release. Today, we have my rapid fire cannon build, and as always, if you guys are interested in more Diablo 4 content, hit that like button and subscribe. So let's go ahead and jump right into the build. So the build's primary basic skill is going to be Forceful Arrow, and this is going to be one of our only ways to apply vulnerability. Every third arrow we cast makes the enemy vulnerable for 2 seconds. Here we also take Enhanced Forceful Arrow to get the increased crit strike on our third cast, which is, it pairs up really nice when you automatically apply the vulnerable status as well. And we're gonna also be able to pierce through our vulnerable enemies so we can try to apply it to additional targets. So rapid fire is our skill of choice here for our core skill. This is just an absolute boss killer, I feel like. I played around with it a lot in the beta, and even leveling up, I was just tearing through elites in, you know, a cast, maybe a cast and a half. As soon as I apply vulnerability and spam rapid fire, they crumbled. Here we take Enhanced Rapid Fire, which each subsequent arrow from rapid fire has an increased crit strike chance up to 40% for the 8th arrow. And then we gain 15 energy per cast when it damages a vulnerable enemy, therefore we can just spam more and more. So rapid fire is it's a great single target skill, and with the right setup it can even thrive in AoE. The build really is built around the idea of elite and boss and world boss farming with fantastic single target damage with our poison imbue, but I also really wanted the build to have good AoE opportunity for open world purposes as well. So for our ultimate, we ended up going with Rain of Arrows. Now, Rain of Arrows is definitely a great skill. The only downfall that it has is obviously since it's an ultimate, it's 60-second cooldown. So, as you can imagine, we're going to be applying cooldown reduction and where we can in the build. So aside from Rain of Arrows being our ultimate skill of choice, for AoE purposes, we also want to target a very specific aspect also, and that's called Repeating Aspect. Repeating Aspect has a 15% 15 to 30% chance for rapid fire to ricochet to another target. Again, this is just, you know, strictly for AoE. You don't really have to if you don't want to, but if you plan on playing this build throughout, you know, all the content that Diablo has to offer, then, you know, trying to build AoE is really important. So Poison Imbue. Poison Imbuement imbues our next two skills, dealing poison damage and applying 140% of our base damage as additional poison damage over 5 seconds. So the way that Poison Imbue, the way that all imbues work is that something like Rapid Fire and something like Rain of Arrows, every hit. So rapid fire, all 5 arrows. That means every cast, well, in this case 2 casts, has poison built into that skill. So Rain of Arrows, it has 2 different waves. It hits 2 times, each wave doing 100% damage. So both waves, when you imbue them with poison, will hit for poison damage. So Dark Shroud, obviously, again, as my last build, if you watched that, this is going to be our defensive layer, and we put 4 points just like the last build, and with all 5 stacks we're looking at a maximum of 52% damage reduction and a minimum of 10.4. Now every time you take damage, you mitigate that damage and lose a charge. Enhanced Dark Shroud actually has a 10% chance to proc and allow us not to consume a charge when we take a hit. And Subverting Dark Shroud just gives us movement speed, stacks up to 20% for a maximum of 5 charges. Now we also have a choice of which skill you want to use here. You can either use Concealment with Enhanced Stealth to gain energy when we enter Concealment, Subverting Stealth, which anytime we use a skill when we're concealed will actually always make that enemy vulnerable when we hit them. So this could be a second source of inflicting vulnerability. Or you can use Poison Trap, Enhanced Poison Trap, which knocks down enemies for 1.5 seconds when the trap activates, into Countering Poison Trap, which when the trap activates can actually reset our imbuement skill cooldown. For our keystone passives, we have another choice here. So our 2 keystone passives that we're looking at is Precision and Exposure. Now obviously if you're not running Poison Trap, you're not running Exposure. Exposure is targeted directly towards trap skills. Now, precision obviously is for our marksman skills in specific. So every time we crit, we gain more crit damage per stack of precision up to a maximum of 20%. When we reach maximum precision stacks, we get a guaranteed crit strike that also deals 40% crit strike damage. Consumes all stacks of precision, you rinse and repeat. So the passives, I mean, the passives in Rogue are very similar in any build that you really play. So in this case, instead of playing with Sturdy and Siphon and Strikes like I did with the Twist and Blades, because these are specifically for close enemies, as a ranger, you know, as a range character, you really don't want to be in range of anything, right? You don't want anything to be close. You're always going to be moving back, kiting. So we opted not to take these. Instead, we took a point in the stutter step, which just gives us more movement speed on crit. Of course, we take our weapon mastery. Now, for leveling up, I would 100% take bows over crossbows. And when we're reaching endgame, the late game, it really does, you know, take in the factor of, you know, how your build is lining up. Whether you want 12% damage to vulnerable enemies with bows, which have a faster attack speed, or if you want crossbows that give you more crit strike damage to just hit super hard. We take a point in the agile, which just gives us a little 4% dodge chance every time we use a cooldown. We take exploit, which gives us more increased damage to healthy and injured enemies. So healthy enemies are enemies at 80% or more HP. Injured enemies are 35% or less HP. So on this build, I'm actually spec'd into Poison Trap here, but as I said earlier, if you opt to go for Concealment, you would remove the Poison Trap, take all the way up to Subverting Stealth, and instead of 2 points in Malice, you would actually take 1 point in Malice, which gives you increased damage to vulnerable enemies, and you can actually go up here for Mending Obscurity, which heals 3% of max life per second when stealth. We take Precision Imbuement, which just gives us increased crit strike chance on our precisions, and we take Deadly Venom, which deals 9% increased poison damage, since obviously we run Poison Imbuement. Down here towards the ultimates, we take Aftermath. Every time we use an ultimate skill, we restore 25 energy. Rain of Arrows does take up a lot of energy. While moving, we gain a 5% increased regen, and like I said before, you know, we're always moving because we're just, you know, we're always constantly kiting. We're a range character. Haste. Now, this one is definitely a big passive for us. Rain of Arrows does take a lot of energy when you're spamming it. So while you're at 50% max energy, you gain 15% attack speed, or movement speed rather. While you're below 50% max energy, you gain 15% attack speed. So again, since we're always spamming rapid fire, and since it does take so much energy, there's going to be a lot of uptime on the 15% attack speed. Now, I mean, just for, you know, the build and the video purpose, we're going to remove Concealment here, remove Mending Obscurity. We're going to spec in the Poison Trap. Now, for the Renown 10 version, you're really, again, just like my other video, if you watch that, you're putting all points in the passives. If you really want, you can put a couple points in the Poison Trap, you can put another point in Adrenaline, another point in the Aftermath, a couple more points in the Stutter Step, and another point in Agile. Now, I will have a written guide also that shows all the links for Poison Trap and Concealment builds, and I'll even throw in an extra Paragon board. I'm not actually going to throw the Paragon board into the video like I do in my last one, but I do have them all linked in the Google Doc, along with, you know, what I would think would be the better alternative or best alternative for each level. Now, I do want to talk about the pros and the cons, and do want to remind people that even the affixes that you're looking to look for or wanting to look for in the build to scale the build, I'll include those in the written guides as well. But for the pros and cons, I would definitely say that it's definitely one of the strongest single target builds that you can probably have for Rogue, because the scaling potential between poison and rapid fire, just pure damage, is really through the roof. You have a lot of skill flexibility between Poison Trap, between Concealment, between the double Keystone passives. The mobility is really nice too, with all the stack and movement speed modifiers. Now, the big cons are the obvious lack of AoE. Between wanting the repeating aspect, You know, that's a big con, having to hunt for one certain legendary to make the build feel better in terms of open world farming. Stacking cooldown reduction isn't going to be the easiest when you want to scale the build in terms of damage as well. It just takes an extra affix to roll. You have no real crowd control. If you do run the poison trap variation, every time that the trap activates and hits an enemy, you will knock it down for 1.5 seconds, but that's really nothing. You could also opt to spec in the Supreme Rain of Arrows, but that's also, I mean, that's only 60 seconds. It's only on the second wave. So every 60 seconds, you'll be able to knock some enemies down. It's really not that great. There's no consistent crowd control. And because of the lack of AoE in the build, it's definitely going to be slow for leveling in some stages. You're gonna melt bosses, but when you're out and about and you want to open world grind and you want to catch up with XP and catch up with leveling, it's just not going to be as fast as other builds. And that's it for the rapid fire build. If you enjoyed the video, I will be dropping one every day up until release. We have one more that I planned for the Rogue, and then we'll move on to another class. So until next time, amigos, take care.